Oh, hello. I didn't hear you come in. Welcome back to my class, Intermediate Writing. Professor Kentley here. I guess I didn't hear very well. I was listening to some Swedish heavy metal music before class and I can't hear too well. So if you came in, I didn't hear you. All right. This lecture, we will talk about some text features of different styles and genres of writing. And I'm going to kind of revisit this topic. You may be tired of it by now. Professional, academic, popular sources. But I have some more to say about that, which will hopefully make more sense. And I've got a little web page that I can send you to with a summary of some of this stuff. On my book, on page 86, I've got this little chart. If this were a live class, I would have you discuss this in groups and fill this out. After reading some of the sort of informal case studies in the book, we've had some informal case studies like the Nokia and Microsoft and Yahoo examples and things like that, as well as the Scientific American article about the origins of laughter, and haven't had too many examples of humanities essays here, but we've had some, the little thing about poem, the psychology of poems, poetry, and then there's some social sciencey education articles in there that we haven't really discussed. I didn't assign them because we don't have time, and they don't really work well unless it's a live class. But in this little table here on page 86, I would have made you compare these different types of writing and some of the different text features. Let's just go through some of these and find some of the distinguishing features of different kind of genres or styles of writing. And this will include, academic, non-academic, professional kinds of writing. The writer's purpose, when you look at the Scientific American article, what's the writer's purpose? It's to inform the public about some new scientific research. And it's also designed to get you interested in it. It's trying to make it more interesting and explain why this is interesting or why this is kind of cool. If it's a humanities essay, you're trying to show that maybe your interpretation of things is valid. And when it comes to, say, literature, there's no one right interpretation. Things are somewhat subjective, but you want to show that maybe your interpretation is valid. It makes sense. It has some value to it. Not that it's right. That's not the purpose of studying literature, but that your ideas are valid. They make sense. So you're trying to persuade people about that. For business articles, like the informal case studies in this book and some of the more formal ones that I'll be sharing with you later on, discussing, you're trying to show that you're trying to persuade people about your analysis. It's ultimately your analysis, and you're trying to persuade people that your analysis is valid or likely correct. Your analysis of this company. You're trying to persuade, not only informing people about a particular business case, but you're trying to persuade people that this is the right course of action for the company, or this is what the company should have done, or this is what this is the reason why the company failed, or this is the reason why they succeeded. You're trying to persuade people. So in these different kinds of writings, professional or academic, you're trying to persuade people. Even if it's like a more scientific paper, you're trying to persuade people that this experiment is cool, that this hypothesis is correct, or at least valid or makes sense. So there's an element of informativeness and there's an element of persuasion, persuading people that this analysis is the right one, or that this analysis at least is valid. It makes sense. It can work, and it helps us to understand something better. Intended audience for Scientific American: general college-educated readers who would have some interest in science, who care about science and care about what's going on. And it could be people in different fields who just want to know or need to know what's going on in science. Maybe you're a high school science teacher. Maybe you're working in the government and you just need to know what's going on in the world of science. Humanities, people who have an interest in humanities or language and literature, for example, of some kind, usually at the college level or beyond. Business articles, of course, are people who work in business or have an interest in business, studying business. So kind of they have more professional expectations. They need good information. They need accurate information. They need what is likely a reasonable analysis, because they have maybe questions, or they might learn or benefit from an analysis or a case study or something like that. Tone, the Scientific American article was semi-formal. It was professional in tone. There were some occasional examples of somewhat informal tone. Mostly it was professional discussion of some scientists' research. Now in the introduction and in the conclusion, there the writer, this is not always the case, but occasionally with a professional source like Scientific American, the writer might also try to get the reader's interest or make somewhat of a personal connection with the reader. So overall, the writer needs to sound professional, but there might be cases like in the introduction or the conclusion where the writer is also trying to get your interest or kind of help you to realize why this might be interesting, make a personal connection. So the introduction of the article had a quote from the researcher, kind of a cute quote, and the ending of the article, the writer basically was giving you advice about not grunting or snorting or doing something embarrassing. Humanities essays tone tends to be pretty professional. Occasional use of first person, but largely third person. Professional sounding, academic sounding tone. Very academic sounding tone, complex sentences and vocabulary. Business articles, semi-formal tone oftentimes. It's for business people who are not heavily academic. They probably have a college or master's level degree in something business related or particular field. So they're educated. So they want a professional sounding tone. It doesn't have to be dry and academic, not too academic, but it has to be a professional, kind of maybe semi-formal tone, as we've seen in these articles. Type of information, a science magazine is going to present basically information and why it's relevant, why it's interesting. What's the use of this? Humanities, again, it's more about persuading people that maybe your interpretation is valid and it helps us to understand something better. Business articles, pretty much informative information and analysis. Analysis and hard information. Not technical academic information. Not a lot of theoretical information, except that where a theory or model is going to help you to understand a particular case study. As I mentioned, the introductions and conclusions. The introduction in a science magazine article is going to try to get your interest, but not too informally. Humanities essays, pretty much in any academic writing, it kind of identifies, it sets up maybe the background, specific background information, and it sets up a thesis, which is connected to the research question. And that's pretty much true in one way or another of academic writing in general. Business articles, you maybe present some specific background information about the company or the case, and the research question, or maybe it's maybe actually have a more specific thesis, a more specific argument. The research question could be, why did this company fail? Why did this merger fail? Or it could be more of an argument. This merger failed because of X, Y, and Z. So a research question or a specific argument in the introduction. So in terms of the other aspects of vocabulary, style, and all of these, professional sources like the Scientific American are going to have definitely college level style vocabulary, at least college level style vocabulary. Somewhat complex sentences, the kind that an adult, college educated reader would expect, because it's going to be more efficient for presenting and processing information. Fairly complex sentences, and have noun phrases with a lot of adjectives, or a noun modified by a following prepositional phrase, like the situation in Finland, for example, post modifier it's called. A lot of those in professional writing. You get to academic writing, much even more complicated sentences, very complex sentences, a lot of technical vocabulary. Why? Because academic people like us like to show off. Well, yeah, partly, but no, that's not the main reason. It's because technical vocabulary, complex sentences are just more efficient for presenting a lot of complex or technical information and ideas in a concise way, so that you can develop your ideas in a lot of depth and detail and present them efficiently. It's more efficient for what we do. That's why we use really technical words and complicated, very complex, long sentences. Sometimes you might complain about, oh, this sentence is too long. In academic writing, it may not be unusual for that field. Not at all. So those are some of the text features. Now let me kind of expand it and go expand this to some general criteria for types of sources. So when we revisit this distinction between popular, professional, and academic sources, we talked about the writer's expertise. And that's one criterion for distinguishing types of sources as popular, professional, or academic, the writer's expertise. And we talked about the audience as a writer writing for educated people who are not experts in the field, professional writing, or is the writer writing just for experts in his or her field? That's pure academic, heavy academic writing. There's some other kind of criteria that we can talk about. Formality, the formality of language, of course, which I just mentioned. The degree of complexity in the sentences and the vocabulary is one thing. More complex sentences and more complex vocabulary is more efficient for technical or theoretical or very academic explanations and ideas. Whereas with more professional sources, a moderate amount of complexity is fine. For popular sources, no, you want to write in a very simple style for the average reader, because maybe you want people just to buy your books. So you're appealing to a mass audience. There's also quality control procedures, which I'll talk about in purpose. So behind the publication of these different kinds of sources, there's usually, well, at least with the better ones, some kind of quality control. Besides the writer, there is someone behind the writer, like an editor or a publishing company, that is trying to make sure that this article or book is not terribly wrong or awful or evil or something like that. And then the purpose, why are people writing and publishing this stuff? So let's look at formality. So in addition to some of the basic vocabulary, sentence structure, grammar kind of stuff, longer paragraphs, so like with popular writings, maybe short paragraphs. Professional writing tend to have somewhat longer, more developed paragraphs. With academic writing, very long paragraphs are quite normal. Aside from these kinds of things, some other markers of formal versus informal style. The tone in the audience, if you're trying to present yourself as an expert and you're writing to an educated audience, educated readers, you're going to write in a professional or academic tone that shows you have authority, that you are an expert, that you have authority to write about this and to say something about this, that you have credibility, you're a credible person and reliable person to communicate on this issue. Veracity, that is truthfulness, that you communicate to your audience that you are sincere and you're honest, that you're not introducing your bias. So with more professional and especially academic sources, that you're not biased, you're not emotional, you're not subjective, but you're professional. You're trying to maintain a professional relationship with you and the audience. You are respecting the audience enough to to speak to them in a fairly formal way, and respecting yourself enough to speak in a formal way to your audience. You treat them with respect in terms of being as accurate as possible, and you make sure that your information is as accurate and precise as possible. And that's another reason why we quote sources. Then there's the quality control purposes, methods, which I'll talk about later. The purpose, of course, sources are another criteria, the kinds of sources you use and how you use those. I'll explain those in a few minutes. And the purpose, is this written to make money? Like popular sources, is it written to inform the public at a fairly professional level? Or is it written for really technical, academic, high-level discussion for an academic audience? The purpose. Pretty much all of this is written to inform people and to persuade people. But if it's a popular source, the persuasion is maybe the most important thing. Persuading people and selling things, selling books, selling magazines are maybe the most important thing. And maybe accuracy is less important, sadly. And persuading people to your own opinion. That's kind of maybe a key thing in popular sources. So those are some criteria. So back to the tone and audience, things like that, the veracity, the source use, the kinds of sources you use, using quality, professional or academic sources, and demonstrating your expertise in the way you use sources, the way you write, you present your arguments. There are some informal language elements that I'll mention. So more informal elements that are typical of more informal writing and more popular writing. Maybe heavy use of things like first, second, third. In academic writing, you don't use these so much unless you're talking about something that's really complex or abstract or hard to follow. Otherwise, in formal English, we don't use things like first, second, third so much. By the way, as I might have mentioned before, first, second, third, that's North American style. Firstly, secondly, thirdly is British style. Don't confuse them. Other kind of informal transitional expressions or connectors, whether or not. We don't know whether or not this will happen. Well, that's more informal. Just formally, it's we don't know whether this will happen. It is not known whether this will happen. Whether or not is more informal. Informal papers tend to use a lot more but and so and. More formal style will use more variety, more instead of but a lot. Occasion it's sometimes fine, but more often however, in contrast to the contrary, yet, while, and such. Instead of so, therefore, thus, hence, as a result, and things like that. Informal writing will use more things like comment clauses like I think, or someone thinks that, people believe that, things like that, kind of vague expressions like that. More use of there is, there are in informal writing, and more use of topic transition, what are called topic transitions. So there is and there are, that's kind of for shifting to a new topic, introducing a new topic. And maybe informal writers will use those expressions a lot. They're less common in formal style, when instead you might just start a new paragraph to start a new topic, or just introduce a new topic directly with that noun in the subject of a sentence. Speaking of, so topic transitions. So more often in informal writing and speaking, use these topic transition markers. You need to go back to a previous topic. Speaking of, what we were talking about earlier, or as for, as to. As for the experiment, it's kind of more informal style. You would just cut those out and just start with, the experiment. Or as for the results of this experiment, instead just say the results of this experiment show. So those are some things. The types of sources that are used. Academic sources will use academic sources. Popular sources might not cite sources at all, or just mention them informally, like Professor Smith at Purdue University said such and such. Professional sources will tend to cite sources either kind of informally, like, Professor Smith, professor of biology at Purdue University, in a recent research paper reported that. So a little more specific sources, or maybe even a citation system like Chicago footnote style or something like that, at least. Academic sources will of course use very formal systems for citing sources. Chicago APA MLA style, for example. Finally, there's some quality control or kind of vetting or sort of filter. So vetting, so imagine if a person is being considered for a high-level government job. So that person is going to go through a vetting process. They're going to check his background. Maybe some office in the government will check his background or her background. Has this person done anything illegal ever? Or they will not only check criminal record, but interview people who know the person and have worked with the person. Say, has this, and find out all that they can about the person's behavior and lifestyle. Is there anything about their lifestyle that could be a problem if they get promoted to a high government position? This person into gambling or drinking or something that would look bad, that would compromise his job or his judgment or her ability to focus on the job, or anything like that. So vetting, you make sure that it's okay. So with popular sources, there's not much vetting or quality control. An editor of a book company will say, oh, this looks like it'll sell a lot of books, and they're not going to do much vetting, except, we don't want to get sued over this stuff, please take it out. Because that's just, they'll sue you and they'll sue us too. So please take that out. You're saying really bad things about the person that are probably not true and illegal, or you're advocating we should, do that. No. We'll get in trouble if we publish that. Other than that, there's not much vetting for a popular source. As long as it's, going to make them money. And of course, the presentation along with that, it's laid out, designed to look pretty and attractive, pretty magazine covers, pretty book covers, formatting so it's easily readable, nice pictures and such. That too you see with popular sources and not with academic sources. Professional sources with vetting, there's probably an editor who's managing the articles that are published in a magazine or a professional book, who probably knows something about the field, knows something about the area, and have maybe, I'm not sure how you get those jobs, but they probably may have a master's degree at least and has some, or years of experience working in that area, and so they may not catch everything, they may not catch some things, but at least there's some quality control with professional sources and professional publications. And the editors might have a master's or PhD or experience, so they can catch serious problems, but maybe not everything. Now, let me get a linguistics journal. Okay, if I wanted to publish in this one, I haven't published in this one yet, but someday I hope to. But if I wanted to publish an article, I do a research project and I write a manuscript, an article with my results, my experiment, my results, and I want to publish it in here. I will send it to the editor of the journal. This is an academic journal, and the editor sends it out to some others who have some background in my topic, who are professors, and I don't know who they are, they don't know who I am, the names are taken out. It's all done anonymously, usually, if it's a good journal, and they will give the editor feedback, and to the editor and to me, through the editor. They'll give feedback to me, but I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am. And they might say, well, we'll publish this if you make some corrections and changes. Or we won't publish this because this is poorly written, or you don't have a good reason for doing this research, or the results are not clear, or if there's just some serious problems, like they should be able to catch maybe plagiarism or you're stealing ideas from somebody else, or it's just bad. They should be able to catch or see if it's bad research and say, don't publish this at all. This is bad research in some way. Poorly done research, poorly written research, or maybe some problems the research, or these claims just can't be true or not suitable for this journal. But if things go well, they'll say, okay, make these corrections and we'll publish it. And so I go through some back and forth, and I make the corrections and make things so that it's a better article, it's good enough for this journal, and hopefully it will get published someday. That's vetting process, the quality control process. With academic sources, it's called peer review. I have anonymous peers, professors, who are checking the work to make sure that it's good. Hopefully not just okay, but good enough to be published here in this journal. So I'll actually hopefully post the website, if I remember, in the description down below this video, if you're watching this through YouTube. Comparison of academic, professional, popular sources according to these criteria. So just briefly, popular or general sources, the author may not be qualified, or they don't really have real training or expertise, not enough. They may have some knowledge, but they're not really reliable experts. They're written for audience of anybody who could read, basically. The information is often secondary. The author's gotten it or heard it from somewhere else. And the original sources may be very informally cited, like according to Professor so-and-so, maybe not. The information may be quoted incorrectly or oversimplified. You don't know necessarily if it's good information. There's not much quality control other than, well, this will sell books. So a lot of popular peer articles, popular trade books fall into this category. General reference books that are not really, most of the information is not really informative. General dictionary, Wikipedia, encyclopedia. Now there are some exceptions to the use of popular sources. If you're writing a paper in a literature class, you might, besides citing like fictional works, you might cite pop culture examples. If you're analyzing the novel Frankenstein by Shelley, which was kind of like the first science fiction novel, as far as I know, you might quote popular sources, popular movies, or other popular sources that refer to the Frankenstein story. For example, in humanities courses, maybe a media course, you might cite popular media examples for your research paper on media. If you're a linguist, you might cite popular examples of how a certain expression is used in popular sources for your linguistic analysis of this expression, and things like that. Professional sources, the person is either a trained expert or a professional expert who's worked in a professional field for a while and has good knowledge and is writing to educated readers. Information may be primary, their own information, or often secondary, but hopefully the person is a reliable person to relay this information to us, and there is some quality control involved through editors, for example, to make sure that it's okay. So we already talked about examples: popular books written by experts, specialized periodicals like science magazines, trade journals and such. We've talked about those already. Academic sources, academic experts writing for other academic experts, pretty technical or high level information, generally primary information, the author's own research, own analysis. And there are pretty strict quality control methods usually involved with academic writing. It doesn't catch all of the problems. Sometimes bad research does get published. Yes, that happens when the reviewers reviewing the article aren't paying attention or just aren't good enough. But usually it works. Usually it works to make sure that good research gets published. And we've talked about examples already: academic journal articles, academic research journals, monographs, and other things. And there's more here on my website that you can look at. If you have questions, post them in the comments here on YouTube or in the LMS, or email me if you have questions about sources. And for your papers, if you are citing sources in another language, there is a section in my book about how to handle non-English sources. If you're citing a source in Korean or Chinese or Swedish, your favorite Swedish metal band, you're citing in your literature class because they did a cool song about a Shakespeare theme. Okay, there is a section in my book about how to cite foreign language sources or non-English sources when you're writing a paper in English. Okay, so we have talked about some text features of different genres of writing and kind of wrap that back into our discussion of different kinds of sources, and hopefully this will give you a better idea of sources that you might want to think about for your final paper. So good luck with that final paper. Hope you have fun with it. Hope you learn a lot from doing it. And it's on my the class website, by the way, and by now it should be in the LMS. So good luck with that. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.